Alright, let's check our ESD relay. Control state. We're gonna turn it on. And we are pierced in at our PCM C3 connector. The two brown white feeds, pins 19 and 28 on our C3 connector, which is the ESD relay output inputs. Basically it's monitoring the voltage from the ESD relay that goes to all our coils and all our injectors. So I've got all the coils, all the injectors plugged in. I'm hooked to B negative with my test light, and I'm checking to make sure that it's there. And I got a bright test light, so let's toggle it. Okay, so that one's there. Let's look at the other one. Okay, that one's nice and bright. That one's nice and bright. Okay, now let's take a look down at our ignition coils. Okay. That was for our power feed to our coil. Didn't look that bright. Control side. I guess it's pretty bright. Okay. Let's see what that can, let's see if that can carry a little bit bigger load. Let me grab a 5 amp test light. Alright, again, so I've got a 5 amp test light hooked to that coil feed, the feed to that ignition coil. 5 amp test light. So that's coming from this ESD relay, okay? Which it's gonna control the power, the feed, or the leg side or load side of this relay is going to be powering up this 25 ampere, which powers up all our ignition coils and all our injectors. And you can see the one that we're having issues with on cylinder 1, we got no issue. Now if I were to go to the other side, the control side of this primary on this coil, it's going to do the same thing because it's going to go through the windings of the coil, okay? I already checked resistance. 800 milliohms of resistance, warm, so that's just above spec, which is fine. Let's check at the computer once. Alright, so what I did is I hooked my 5 amp test light with a jumper over to these power feed, these ESD relay output monitoring circuits at the PCM. Definitely not a wiring issue, guys. Definitely not. Both of those are good. Right at the PCM. Okay. Alright. We do need to check calibrations. We'll do that as well. I did not see any TSBs out there for this. I've checked everything I can think of. Monitors complete this cycle. Let me see what this one says. So when they test for this ionization, did these monitors have to run? I would have to do some more research on that. Let's see, monitors complete this cycle. See here, misfire not supported. I'm not sure how long it's got to shut down for it to consider it another trip either. So see if if it'll actually communicate again. Awesome. All right. Look at all this awesome data you get in here. Look at that. ASD sense switch. Filtered switch state on. I just want to see what data they're giving me. .4 psi on that VVT. That's cool. It might reset. He said it took 9 miles to burn up that ignition coil. 9 miles. So, this ignition coil didn't look bad though. Yeah, I'm running a drive cycle, guys. I'm gonna make sure this code don't come back. So, I'll look at some data once I get it nice and warm and hot, but I'm just gonna run a drive cycle. There's my numbers, guys. Cruising at 65 on the highway. Hopefully you can see it. So take a good look. Sorry for the glare. So far, runs excellent. Well, this Ram just got a little bit more interesting. Third drive cycle, or third trip, so to speak. These are the codes I got. So now we got a 2302, a 1411, and a 688 with the ASD main sense circuit. And what's even better about it is it won't start. So, go back into functionals here. Let's command this ASD relay on auto shutdown relay control state. We're at the fuse box. We're going to check the 25 amp fuse that powers up our ignition coils and our injectors real quick. We'll just put it on toggle. You can hear it. There it is. Let's check the other side of the fuse. Oh, can't see it. Hold on a second. We got nothing. Nothing, guys. Yeah, blew the ASD fuse. Well, that right there is a clue. Put a new fuse in and good to go. Alright. Let's check our ASD relay output. Signal circuits at the PCM. I'm on C1 right now. You can see that one's good. That one's good. That's on C3. There's 2 of them there. And that one's good. So, what's pulling all the amperage? Do we legitimately have a short to ground somewhere? Or something on the circuit blowing that fuse? Like, I don't know, an intake manifold runner? Control solenoid, maybe? Intake manifold short runner valve, solenoid control state. Let's check that one. I can hear it moving. That's toggling it. Open. Closed. Open. Closed. Well, we can check the amperage. Let's do that. Alright, it's commanded on. I'm toggling the intake manifold runner control solenoid. I'm getting an amperage measurement on it. And we're on a 500 millivolt scale, so it's pulling just around 2.5 amps when it's commanded on. Every now and then you get that large spike. So let's see here. We're on a 5-second screen, 500 millivolts. We're inverted, we're filtered just because, again, I got the 20 amp fuse pulled out and we're just checking it with an amp clamp. So, if we want to go back to our control state, you can see I got it in toggle mode, just toggling it back, open and closed, open and closed. So something fried that ASD relay fuse. So do we legitimately have a short to ground in our harness somewhere? Look at that spike. But it's not a lot. Interesting. Now if we want to see it a little bit more detail, we can come. We go to 20 millisecond screen. Stop it. Zoom it. And this is the waveform. So, you know, is that shorted? Sure doesn't look normal, right? But I don't know what normal looks like. You know, this way it looks better. Interesting. Alright, let's blow the crap off this thing before we tear this engine down any further. And get this intake off and see what we find. Now they're old, they're brittle, they don't want to come apart. Take your time. These vacuum lines off, brake booster, purge valve. Out of there. Come on. Bye.
looks like 215s. 215s.
5 amp test light. We're toggling the ASD relay. There's the brown white coming out of the brown connector. Explain that here in a minute, but you can see we got a good light. Moving over to our other one, our brown gray, which goes down to that runner control solenoid. Good light. Down to the IMRC valve harness connector. The brown gray going into that. You can see that's good. To the computer. Let's check the other ones. There's 3 of them total. One's down to the control. There's one of these is the control wire for cylinder number 1, which we should see that light on that as well, which I think is this next one. There we go. So that one's there. Oh, yep. So that feeds there. That one's there. That one's there. Alright, we're tied into ignition coil 1, power feed. That's good. Let's check its other side. Okay. Go to the next cylinder. That's good. That's good. Check these injectors. That one's good. Good. That one's good. That one's good. That's good. Okay, let's clarify some things on this case study because I wasn't able to film everything I wanted to film and all the testing I did do on this RAM, okay? However, I'm going to clarify. So P2302 ignition coil 1 secondary circuit, insufficient ionization. When it's monitored is when the engine's running and the battery voltage is greater than 10 volts. And when it sets is if the PCM detects that the secondary ignition burn time is incorrect, too short or not present. An error is detected. 1 trip fault, 3 good trips to turn off the mill. Okay, we checked secondary on cylinder 1. We did see issues with it. We checked injection. We moved coils. And moving coils
actually, after moving coils and whatnot, we just, when I was testing, I wasn't able to see what the computer was having a problem with. And obviously it wasn't setting the fault right away. And it took pretty much 3 trips in order for me to get this thing to act up and short that ASD fuse, that 25 amp fuse. We'll get to that in a second. But if we look here, possible causes: ASD control output circuit, coil control number 1 circuit open. I know that's not the case because I checked my control circuit loaded with a test light. Coil control number 1 circuit shorted to ground. I know that's not the case. Now, this is the other thing I want to talk about, is checking for shorts to ground in this harness. We'll get to that in a minute here. Coil on obviously a bad coil, and then of course our PCM. So we're pretty much narrowed it down to the last guy. And I'm going to be honest with you, the PCM did get replaced in this truck because, well, I don't mean to be a spoiler, but we're coming to the end of the video here, and I'm going to give you my reasoning behind why I called the PCM on this vehicle. I was not able to find what am I trying to say? I was not able to condemn this PCM with a smoking gun. What I should have done, after looking at this in hindsight, is here's what I should have done. When I was on that test drive and I got those 3 codes to set and this fuse to blow. So what we're looking at here is our coil circuit, right? So this fuse, this MSD fuse 25 amp, or M50 fuse 25 amp. This is the one that blew, okay? Now the only way that could have blown, and I'll show you here in a second, is if this brown white were shorted to ground. One of these, if one of the ignition coils was pulling too many amps, okay, or if one of the control wires shorted to ground, okay, holding that, primary on that coil, charging it when it shouldn't be, or our computer is holding the ground, the driver for number 1 is faulty. I mean, really, that could really only be the answer, okay? Now, the injectors share this circuit as well, this power feed circuit. They're not showing it here, but I checked the amperage on the injectors. I checked all of this wiring loaded with a 5 amp test light. We checked these, you can see here, fused ASD relay output on C1 at the PCM, fused relay output on C3. So here's all the, these are those 3 I kept checking at the PCM, okay? Forgive me, I'm doing the best I can here to explain this. Essentially what I ended up doing on this vehicle is I ended up, I don't know if you remember in the video when I took my test light and I had it to be positive, okay? And I was down here at ignition coil 1, and with the key off, all right, the key was off, test light hooked to battery positive, and whenever I would touch pins 1 or 2, the control side or the power feed side of ignition coil 1, I was getting that flashing light, and I was hearing something under the around the intake activating when I was doing that. I'm going to show you what that was here in a minute, but that is what that pulse you were seeing, that pulsed ground, if you will, that was coming from the PCM, guys. And the reason I know that is because I cut this wire here up by the tipum. I cut it. All right. I cut that wire. I also cut all 3 of these at the PCM, these output circuits, because I had to narrow down where that was coming from. Okay. I disconnected the coil when you disconnect the coil, and I would check just the control side of the ignition coil for that pulse ground, it wasn't there, which told me that it was coming from the power feed circuit. Okay. I tried disconnecting all the injectors, no change. I disconnected all the coils, no change. I cut the wire at the PCM, no change, or I'm sorry, up at the TIPM here, no change. No change, still there. I cut all three of these, and I find it coming out of that pulsed ground was coming out of these output circuits in this PCM. So was there a problem in the PCM output ASD relay output sensing circuit? I have no idea. I have no idea. It didn't look normal. I mean, how are you supposed to know? They don't tell you. Short to ground testing. LED test light. Ohm meter. I did them both. I ohm this circuit out to ground. You know, one end of the meter here, 1 meter to battery negative, and I've got no continuity. I did those checks on all ends of the circuits. All ends. Checking this harness for a short to ground. You know, maybe I missed something. Inspect that harness. That's another reason why we had to remove the intake, was to get down to all these components. And there was, let me show you what it looked like. I think I shown you in the video, but let me show you some of these things that I had seen that stood out to me. I thought I had a picture of that. Yeah, right here. So take a look at what all the rodents that have been down under here. Now, this is common on these, and that's why I knew that this is a route I was going to have to take. I was also concerned with up here in the back of the heads where the harness runs around, of chafing, possibly a short to ground. That wasn't the case. We had a lot of open wires. Again, when I was done with the repair, all of these wires, all these ignition coil wires, all got rewrapped and protected with loom. Okay, so I spent a good deal of time fixing all the harness issues and whatnot. Nevertheless, the other code we were getting was for this Mds solenoid on cylinder 1. Now, I replaced that solenoid. I wasn't even going to take the chance. It's throwing a performance code. It's going to affect the way that cylinder fires if that thing's hanging. The fact that it threw the code, the fact that the harness in here for these MDSs was chewed into a little bit from the rodents, that harness got replaced. Okay. That would not cause, because these MDSs are on a completely separate circuit. That is not going to cause our coil to do this. And that's what I haven't shown you guys yet, is what exactly my coil. Let's see here. This is the coil after that test drive when I got those 3 codes to set. Oh yeah, that's the new quote unquote coil on number 1, and that's the top side of it, and that's what happened to it. It literally shorted it and cracked the top of it. When I went to go retest, after I put that 25 amp fuse, when I went to go retest this ignition coil control, I was getting secondary shocks through my test light into my hand because this thing was so shorted. Okay. So are we dealing with one of those deals where, like, the PCM driver on the control side was just, who knows, holding it too long, holding the ground too long, and over time, as it got hot, it finally shorted out the ignition coil. And then maybe the ignition coil, when it shorted, damaged the ASD relay output sensing circuit in the PCM. This is entirely possible. It's a lot of voltage. It has nowhere to go other than backwards, right? Who knows? I have no idea. I wish I did. Maybe somebody out there does know. Let me show you some other things that kind of add up. Obviously, I pulled all my spark plugs. So let's take a look at all these. So here's a picture of the spark plugs that were in it on cylinder 1. NGK. Copper. Is that a copper I see? Is that an NGK copper? No, this to me doesn't look like a NGK. You know, was this a knockoff NGK spark plug? I don't know. I don't know. But I could tell you this. This, along with all the other ones, no, it had champions in all the other ones. Same thing, coppers. I know these trucks call for I know these were the wrong. It had the wrong spark plugs in it. Okay, somebody had replaced plugs at one time. I don't know which shop. I'm not trying to say anything, but we got these spark plugs straight from Mopar. Okay, and they are an REC. Oh, let me see here. I thought I had it up. Where's Protoman? Yeah, let's take a look at that real quick. So if we go to the spark plugs, this didn't have the right plugs in it. Nope, sure didn't. We can come back to this. Let's see, engine performance, ignition system, service information. Just take a look at that. Spark plug. Specifications. Spark plugs. Okay, 5.7 calls for an REC 14 MCC4. Now that is a copper core, I'd imagine. 14 is automotive. I forget what all this stands for, but this is the plug that it requires, okay? It also, let me show you something else. If we come down to 5.7 ignition, spark plug. Guess you can go here too. Yeah, REC 14 MCC4. There's our gap. Now look at this torque. 13 foot-pounds plus or minus 2. 18 Newton meters plus or minus 3. Torque critical taper design. Do not exceed 15 foot-pounds. Interesting. Obviously, we torqued those correctly, but some things to keep in mind. These are all things that I was looking at. The other thing, take a look at this ignition coil. This is one of the stock. This is what all the ignition coils look like in this thing, except for that new one that, of course, was exploded. But once I pulled the boots off, look at all the rust. Look at all the rust in there. Where did that come from? Okay, obviously these are original coils. So, what am I getting at? This thing got all new coils. I called it. I said, no way in hell I'm putting that back on there. No way in hell I'm putting these coils back in. Not if we're doing a PCM. Nope. So I got all new ignition coils. You got all new spark plugs that were the correct spark plugs. All factory, all OEM, Mopar coils, and a new PCM. Well, a remand, I believe, is what we went with, because that was all we could get. And then we had it flashed and programmed, and yeah, and it's fixed. I know it's fixed. It's been gone for over 3 weeks. So I just thought I'd share this because, everything kind of adds up, but I couldn't get the smoking gun on this truck. All right. I wanted to, I really did. But I just wasn't able to capture it. Now, what I should have done, let me get back to this. Let's go back to these wiring diagrams. We'll go back to that OEM wiring diagram. Let's see, it was in DTC index. Powertrain, I think it was in this one, 2302. So, I just want to clarify that, yes, there was a lot of testing I did make sure that that harness was not shorted to ground, well, you know, as far as I could take it. But what I would like to do next time if I have something like this is, for one, I need to film everything, but, you know, easier said than done in the shop. But what I should have done on that test drive is I should have pierced in to both sides of this ignition coil, the power feed and the control side, with 2 channels in my scope. Okay, and I could have even put an amp clamp around it at the fuse here, so I can monitor all these ignition coils. Okay. You know, thinking about it in hindsight or after the fact, that would have been the way to catch it, because maybe I would have caught something when it died. I don't know. Really weird, because I literally drove this thing for close to an hour. It took me of running trips to get it to finally, and even then I got back to the shop and it was running fine. No issues, no misfires, nothing. I'm literally sitting on the alignment rack looking at field trim data, I think, or whatever, and that's when the truck died. It just died and set those 3 codes, or as far as I know, and then it was a crank no start. Interesting. So that was the fix. That was my fix. All new ignition coils, factory, plugs, all factory, and a PCM. And then that number 1 MDS solenoid with a new harness for all those MDSs because of rodent damage. Of course, we did new intake gaskets, throttle body gasket, clean the throttle body, put a new air filter in it, changed the oil, and cleared codes and ran a drive cycle, and that's what you're about to see. So I wasn't so concerned with running the drive cycle, but I think I did end up running a complete one for you guys. But nevertheless, hope you guys got something out of this. If you have questions, drop them down, but let's get back to the video.
Alright, start with cylinder number 1. We're going to see what our injector resistance is at room temp. So we're at 11.8 on cylinder 1. Since we got it out, we might as well check them just to make 100% sure. 11.8 ohms, that looks good. Cylinder number 3. There's always a reason. Something took out the coil. The coil took out the computer sensing circuit for the ASD relay output signal. So there's always a reason. 11.8. Okay, cylinder 4. And you got to get to the root cause before you throw a computer in it, because if you don't, you'll fry the new one. Right? It'll just happen again. So we're on cylinder 4 here. 11.8. Cylinder 5. And we'll put new O-rings on these, of course, as well as new intake gaskets. Do not feel bad about that. 1.9. Cylinder 7. Do not feel bad about removing that intake. I had to anyways to test everything to be 100%. Plus there was a rodents down in there. Cleaned all that out. We're gonna have to do that solenoid so it had to come off regardless. The gaskets were all flattened. Cylinder 6 is 11.8. Cylinder 7. So now is as good time as any to get it done. .9 and cylinder 8. 11.8. Looks good to me. Let's check those solenoids for the multi-cylinder deactivation system. Alright, hopefully you guys can see this. This is the multi-displacement system cylinder solenoid harness. Okay, the one that's been chewed into by rodents and will be getting replaced. We don't need any shorts. We're this far into it, we're getting a new harness. It doesn't pay to fix these harnesses. Okay, so starting from the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 should be our ground. Pin 6 is a black, and it is. So they all share the same ground. Our variable valve timing solenoid is also on this circuit, or shares that ground as well. So we're going to go one lead there, and we're going to check our resistance values. Now we're going through the solenoid, back out the ground, okay? So number 1, the very first solenoid on pin 1 is going to be a brown white, and that's for cylinder number 1. And hopefully you can see that. Resistance is 9 ohms, okay? 8.9. So 9 ohms on cylinder 1's solenoid. Next one in line is going to be cylinder 4, a brown light blue. Nine ohms, about the same. Next one is on pin 3, which is a brown dark green, cylinder 6. $8.9. Okay. And let's see, pin 4 is a brown orange, cylinder 7. $8.9, right? And let's see, pin 5 is a dark blue for cylinder, or for our variable valve timing solenoid, which on these I'll show you where that lives. So 7.7 ohms on him, or her, depending on how you want to look at it. Okay, what is spec on these? I have no idea. So they all match in resistance values, guys. So here's going to be my recommendation. Cylinder 1 through a performance code. 4, 6, 1, and 7. And then your VVT solenoid. I'm going to recommend cylinder 1 based on that performance code I was getting. The other thing I want to show you guys is, look at this ignition coil. It blew it apart, guys. Holding that ground. That computer was holding that ground, that control circuit too long. Alright, the Hemi's back. Our local dealer was nice enough to go ahead and program our remanufactured PCM for us. Thanks, guys. And she's running nice. Now, so far so good, okay? I'm gonna take this thing for a long test drive. It hasn't completed a complete drive cycle yet. Pretty sure the evap system's not gonna run just because of the ambient temperature, but I'm not so concerned with that as I am with, obviously, this 25 amp ASD relay output fuse blowing again, okay? So I've got an extra one in my pocket just in case, okay? Not that I'm doubting myself on my call, but you never know, and I don't want to get stranded, okay?
So we're gonna take this baby for a long test drive. She's running nice. Okay, she's clean. I'm gonna put the engine cover back on. I gotta run it back in the shop afterwards anyways, just kind of look over everything just to make sure everything looks good before we give it back to the customer, because obviously this was not exactly a cheap repair, right? But I'm pretty confident we fixed our issue, okay guys? Very confident. But I don't want to be eating my words until I know for sure, so let's go take this thing for a spin. Alright, and see how she does. Alright, so did a quick code scan just to make sure I cleaned up any residual codes that were in here. There were a couple for the door modules. Obviously I had to relearn them. Nothing too fancy about it. You know, you cycle your key off, cycle it back on. It would just, you know, calibration issues for the window switches, okay? And it's real straightforward. You know, you just hold her in the up position for 2 seconds. You push her down for all the way down and hold her for 2 seconds. And then all the way back up. Make sure that your auto up works, okay? Do the same thing for the passenger side. The codes will switch from active to stored, and then just wipe them out of there and you're good, okay? You got to do that anytime you do a battery disconnect. Also, recalibrate your steering angle sensor. That's all been done. So we got no codes. Right now, I did a complete code scan outside of this Parktronics code for this sensor 8 circuit short to battery. Now, that's an active code. It's a hard fault. Don't know if the customer wants to take care of it or not. That's obviously not what the complaint was. So we'll advise them of that, obviously. Now, these tests have already completed. Our oxygen sensor heater, our fuel system, our comprehensive component, and our misfires. Okay, but we still got these ones to run. Like I said, the evap probably will not run. I'm not too concerned about running a drive cycle. I'm more concerned about driving this thing for an extended period of time, you know, down the highway, you know, various driving modes. I'll probably take this thing for a good 30-minute test drive. I'm not gonna lie to you, maybe even 40 minutes, just to make 100% sure that we have fixed that coil shorting issue on cylinder 1. Okay, so our short-term bank 2, and those are pretty balanced out. Yeah, everything's looking pretty balanced. Now, I know this thing's got a little bit of an exhaust manifold leak on this side, and I know it's got a little bit of an exhaust leak on that side. So that might be why we're seeing a little bit of a lean condition in our long terms. So I will advise the customer that, hey, the next thing you should consider doing is exhaust manifolds and gaskets, okay? It's common when you get to, what do we got for mileage on this thing? 112,000. So, you know, you can hear them when it's cold start ticking, making that tick noise, and you can actually hear the little bit of an exhaust leak there. So, you know, that would be the next thing I would suggest doing on the engine, just to get it back to where everything's running perfectly. Again, confident that this engine's good to go, okay? As long as it don't, you know, we all know the Hemis, they have a tendency to, eat cams, or, you know, not trying to curse the vehicle or anything, just, you know, keep the oil changed, obviously, and I think it'd be good to go. I'm a fan of the Hemis. I think they're a good engine myself. I think that, you know, it really comes down to oil changes and how you maintain the vehicle, right? So let's go drive this thing, and let's see how it does, okay? All right, verdict's in. That's an hour-long test drive, maybe just shy of an hour. We passed all our monitors with the exception of our evap, okay? Truck is idling beautifully, okay? Truck drove beautifully. Post-scan, they should save to that work order or that stored vehicle in my vehicle history. Okay, and I've got the vehicle running. Not too worried about it. And you can see we got no codes. All right, that's a new one in the HVAC. So that must have seen an issue with recirc door control. Okay, again, we'll advise them of that whole separate issue. And then that Parktronics sensor. I did notice it says service park assist on the dash. Okay, hard faults. Separate issues. All right, perfect. So there you go. The only one that didn't complete is our evap system. Sweet, right? No more issue. No check engine light. Now, I can print it from here if I want, but I don't like the outlay of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit home. I'm going to go to vehicle history, and I'm going to click view on that vehicle. And you can see here now, not sure why it did all three, but this would be my most recent. So let's click on it. And there you go. All my information's in there. All right. There's my codes that we just looked at. Here's all the systems without codes. And then here's our readiness monitors that have passed, and here's the ones that are not complete. Okay, this is what we're going to give to the customer. So let me, I'm going to save this to my desktop. So for those of you that don't know how to do this, it's pretty straightforward. You hit your print button. I'm going to click save. And then I'm going to name it. And I'm going to name it my work order number in the front, underscore with the vehicle system report, okay? And it's date time stamped. And I just put it on my desktop in a folder, okay? And then I have a copy, and I can email it. Pretty straightforward, okay? It's going to save it as a PDF. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I know this is a long video, but sometimes they got to be long if you want to get everything. So take care, guys.